Why you stop talking, avoidance begin to miss you. You know what happens when someone pulls away from us? We chase, we explain, we try to fix it. And in doing so, we hand them all our power, thinking that if we just say the right thing, if we just show them how good we are, how much we care, they'll finally turn around and give us what we need. But here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is silence. Because here's what happens when you stop talking, especially to someone with avoidant tendencies. They finally have space to feel your absence. Avoidants don't respond to pressure, they respond to distance. And when you're no longer the one reaching out, they're no longer in control of the dynamic. You're not validating them. You're not feeding the cycle. You're just gone. And suddenly, the silence screams louder than your words ever did. But listen carefully. This isn't a game. This isn't manipulation. This is you protecting your dignity. Because someone who pulls away when you're vulnerable, who disappears when you need closeness, doesn't get unlimited access to you. And when you remove your energy, your availability, your emotional labor, they'll start to notice the space where you used to be. Not because you tried harder, but because you finally stopped trying. And in that quiet space, they have to make a choice, grow up or let go. Either way, you win because you're not waiting anymore. You're valuing yourself more than someone else's confusion. And that, my friend, is when everything starts to change. When you stop talking, especially in a relationship with someone who leans avoidant, something powerful begins to happen beneath the surface. Avoidant individuals typically struggle with emotional intimacy where you're consistently present, checking in, explaining yourself, trying to fix the connection. They feel overwhelmed. They may see that emotional intensity as pressure, even if your intentions are genuine and loving. So they pull away, they shut down. And naturally, you want to close the gap. You talk more, you express your feelings, you try to be understanding. But all of that effort often falls on deaf ears. Why? Because an avoidant isn't able to hear you clearly while you're speaking from a place of emotional urgency. But when you go quiet, when you stop reaching out, they finally get the emotional space they unconsciously crave. They're no longer being asked to respond, explain, or be vulnerable before they're ready. Instead of being pushed into discomfort, they are left alone with their thoughts. And in that stillness, they begin to feel the contrast. The constant emotional availability they once took for granted is gone. The comfort of knowing you're always there starts to fade. That's when the avoidant person begins to reflect. People tend to evaluate what they've lost in its absence, not its presence. When someone is always available, they fade into the background. It's only when they step away that their true value becomes visible. The silence gives the avoidant person time to confront what's missing without your voice filling in all the gaps. They're no longer reacting to your emotional expression. They're feeling their own, maybe for the first time. And that's when emotional clarity starts to form. They begin to ask themselves, why haven't I heard from them? Why do I feel this strange emptiness? They may not articulate it at first, but something inside them starts to shift. The very space they thought they wanted starts to feel unfamiliar. They begin to wonder whether what they had with you was more meaningful than they let themselves feel in the moment. The absence gives their nervous system the break it needed so that they can now miss you instead of run from you. In this silence, your emotional weight becomes real to them. They don't feel chased. They don't feel trapped. They just feel the void. And often that's when the truth finally breaks through their defenses. Avoidant individuals are not wired to respond positively to emotional pressure, no matter how gentle or well-intentioned that pressure may be. They often associate closeness with a loss of independence or a fear of being engulfed. When they sense that someone is emotionally leaning in, seeking reassurance, connection, or clarity, it can trigger their internal alarm system. That alarm doesn't always make sense from the outside to the person who simply wants closeness, care, or communication. It can feel confusing and hurtful. But to the avoidant, that closeness often feels like a threat, even when it's coming from love. This is why trying to talk more, clarify your intentions, or ask for emotional openness often backfires. You might think you're moving closer to a resolution or to a deeper bond, but from the avoidance perspective, it feels like too much too soon. Their instinct is to retreat, protect themselves, and create space. They don't want to be controlled, even if you're not trying to control them. The dynamic becomes a silent tug-of-war, where one person seeks connection and the other feels the need to escape it. But the moment you create distance, genuine, calm, self-respecting distance, everything changes. When you stop calling, stop checking in, stop sending long messages trying to explain your side or understand theirs, you're no longer applying pressure. You're giving space, and that space is what allows the avoidant person's defenses to come down. They are no longer reacting to your emotions or trying to avoid your expectations. Instead, they're left alone with themselves. And that's where emotional awareness has a chance to grow. Avoidants don't respond to people trying harder. They respond to people stepping back, not out of spite or punishment, but because it breaks the dynamic that kept them emotionally shut down. When there is no longer a force trying to pull them closer, they have the room to feel whatever they were too overwhelmed to process before. The fear of losing control is gone, and in its place, there's an opportunity for genuine reflection. The shift happens internally. They might not run back instantly. In fact, many avoidants take time to recognize what they're feeling, but they can't do that while someone else is doing all the emotional work for them. The distance you create gives them the emotional safety they crave. And ironically, it's within that space that they can begin to miss you, not because you chase them, but because finally you didn't. Pulling back from someone who has avoidant tendencies is often misunderstood. Many people think that stopping communication or creating distance is a form of manipulation or playing games. But it's not about trying to control the other person or punish them for their behavior. Instead, it's about setting clear boundaries and honoring your own emotional well-being. When someone consistently pulls away or resists closeness, it's easy to fall into the trap of over-explaining, justifying yourself, or chasing after their attention. But this only reinforces an unhealthy dynamic where your needs get sidelined and you lose your sense of self in the process. Establishing boundaries means you decide what behavior you will and won't accept. Not to make the other person suffer, but to protect your dignity and emotional energy. It's a way of saying, I value myself enough not to be available at all times for someone who doesn't meet me halfway. This is not about control. It's about respect. Respect for yourself first, and then, hopefully, respect from the other person. When you stop being the constant source of emotional labor, you reclaim your power and stop enabling the avoidance pattern of retreating whenever things feel too intense. Avoidants often rely on distance as a coping mechanism. They push away to manage their own fears of intimacy and vulnerability. When you stop feeding into that pattern, by withdrawing your availability, you break the cycle. Instead of being the person who chases or explains, you become the person who holds firm boundaries and requires mutual effort. That shift changes the emotional landscape. You're no longer at their mercy or waiting on their timeline. Instead, you create an environment where the avoidant has to meet you where you are or risk losing you. This isn't about punishment or manipulation. It's about creating a balanced relationship dynamic where both parties are responsible for their emotional contributions. Avoidants often don't realize how much their distancing affects the other person until they experience the absence firsthand. When you stop tolerating inconsistent behavior, you set the tone for what you deserve. And in doing so, you also model emotional maturity, which can encourage the avoidant to step up, or at least become more aware of their patterns. At its core, pulling back with boundaries is an act of self-love. It's refusing to be invisible in someone else's life or to lose yourself in the hope that they'll change. By standing firm, you create the possibility for healthier dynamic, one where your worth isn't dependent on someone else's ability to stay close. This kind of strength often forces avoidants to reconsider their choices, not because they feel pressured, but because they witness your confidence and self-respect. When someone is constantly present in another person's life, their value can often be taken for granted, even unconsciously. This is especially true in relationships with avoidant individuals who may struggle to fully appreciate closeness when it's always available. Presence becomes routine, predictable, and sometimes invisible. The energy, time, and emotional support you provide may blend into the background because it feels expected or easy to access at any moment. In this way, your consistent availability can unintentionally diminish your perceived importance in their eyes. However, when you pull back and your presence becomes less frequent, the dynamic changes dramatically. Absence creates contrast. Suddenly, your energy and involvement are no longer constants, they become noticeable gaps. This absence highlights what was once overlooked, and it compels the avoidant person to confront the reality of what they truly valued in you. In other words, your withdrawal acts as a mirror, reflecting your significance back to them, often more clearly than your words or actions ever could. The silence that comes with your absence is powerful. It speaks volumes without needing explanation. When you stop filling the space with messages, calls, or emotional outreach, the avoidant person is left to experience the emptiness you leave behind. This absence can create a sense of loss or longing that wasn't apparent before because the comfort of your constant presence masked it. The quiet gap you create disrupts their usual pattern of emotional detachment and forces them to reckon with feelings they may have been avoiding or suppressing. This is not about playing games or trying to manipulate emotions. Instead, it's about giving space for genuine awareness to surface. The avoidant individual begins to realize the emotional investment you made and how much that investment shaped their experience, even if they couldn't fully acknowledge it while you were always there. Your absence amplifies your value by making it tangible rather than assumed. Ultimately, the power of your presence is revealed most clearly when it is no longer guaranteed. When you stop being a constant, the avoidant person has the chance to recognize what they've been missing, not because you demanded attention, but because you chose to honor yourself enough to step back. That shift can transform their perspective, opening the door to a deeper appreciation or prompting them to reconsider their own feelings and behaviors. Letting go of the need to control the relationship is one of the most difficult yet transformative steps you can take, especially when dealing with someone who has avoidant tendencies. Often we fall into the trap of trying to fix everything, to manage their emotions, to push for answers, or to steer the connection in a direction where we feel safer and more secure. But the truth is, control is an illusion in relationships. The harder you try to control the avoidant person's feelings or actions, the more likely they are to resist and pull away. This resistance isn't personal. It's rooted in their need to protect their independence and emotional boundaries. When you release the need to control, you reclaim your own power and autonomy. Instead of investing all your energy in managing the other person's reactions, you focus on yourself, your values, your boundaries, and your emotional health. This shift is crucial because it breaks the cycle where you're always the one reaching out, explaining, or apologizing. It allows you to stand firm in who you are without bending or compromising your self-worth to accommodate someone else's fears or limitations. This act of letting go also creates a new emotional environment in the relationship. Without your constant efforts to control or fix, the avoidant individual is faced with the reality of their choices and behaviors. They are no longer able to rely on your availability to soothe their discomfort or fill the gaps they create by withdrawing. In this space, they must confront their own feelings and decide how or if they want to engage with the connection on more equal and honest terms. Interestingly, when you stop controlling, you give the avoidant person the freedom to make a genuine choice. They can either step up and meet you emotionally or walk away. Both outcomes serve you because they clarify the nature of the relationship. If they choose to engage, it often signals a willingness to grow and work through their avoidant patterns. If they choose to leave, you've spared yourself prolonged emotional uncertainty and heartache. And by letting go, you also model emotional maturity and self-respect, which can inspire the avoidant to reconsider their own approach to intimacy and vulnerability. You demonstrate that you are whole and complete on your own, which paradoxically can draw them closer because it challenges their fear of losing control. Ultimately, releasing control shifts the dynamic from one of chasing and avoiding to one of mutual respect and responsibility. It creates the possibility for a healthier, more balanced connection where both individuals are accountable for their emotional contributions. This change in energy often marks the turning point where avoidants begin to miss you, not because you forced them to, but because you stepped back and allowed the relationship to breathe. So when you stop talking, when you stop chasing, and when you stop trying to fix what isn't working on someone else's terms, something remarkable happens. You reclaim your power, your peace, and your dignity. And in that very space of silence and self-respect, avoidants begin to miss you, not because you manipulated them, but because you finally honored yourself. Remember, real connection grows not from pressure or pursuit, but from presence and boundaries. When you choose yourself first, you open the door for healthier, more authentic relationships to enter your life. Thank you all for being here, for listening, and for committing to your own emotional growth. It takes courage to stand in your worth and to embrace the discomfort of silence. Keep holding that space for yourself and watch how the people who truly matter begin to see your value. I'm grateful to share this moment with you, and I wish you all the strength and clarity on your journey ahead. Take care, be kind to yourself, and remember, you deserve to be missed. Thank you, and goodbye.